Members of Parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, all viewing this meeting via social media, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this Central Committee meeting of Parliament. This is Central Committee meeting number 19 for today, Tuesday, March 31st. At this time, I want to give a special word of welcome to the Minister of Finance, Ms. Marinka Gums, and her support staff. We have established a quorum of 8. We have established a quorum of 8 members, and I invite you to stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have received notice of absence from the member Meyers. No notices of lateness yet. I do at this time, however, want to extend to MP Darryl York the condolences of the Parliament of Sint Maarten on the passing of his aunt in Aruba. May her soul rest in peace. Are there, we do have, before I continue, members, let me mention a notice of lateness from MP Roseburg. I omitted her name earlier. I continue and I look to the members of Parliament if there are any notifications. I see we do have some members, and I start with giving the floor to MP La Cruz. MP La Cruz, you have the floor.
A blessed afternoon, Madam Chair Lady, Griffier, Honorable Minister, her support staff, my fellow colleagues, those in the Tribune, and all those listening and watching via social media. Madam Chair Lady, you're going to have to give me a minute because I have a couple notifications, okay? And I'll start with the first one. I got a call from a concerned citizen, and he spoke about the crossings, at the zebra path crossings. They're not painted properly, and right before him, someone almost got knocked down because they saw it, but the vehicle didn't. So we don't want that kind of stress added to the country. Then, Madam Chair Lady, last week while we were away, I sent out an article concerning the issues that we're having with the scooters. And I think there are a couple people that just, instead of reading the article, they choose to literally just comment a whole heap of negativity. I'll address that in 1 minute. But basically, a call on, again, to the government to control and put some type of control mechanism on the persons selling the scooters. If the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Justice is doing, and the police department are doing a great job controlling and checking bikes, but it makes no sense if the pipe is not closed. They continue coming on the road and we end up in the same problems. So we're talking about insurance, number plates, helmets, even scooters being sold to minors. So if the government could look into that, again, it was already once mentioned by my person during the budget debate. Then, Madam Chair Lady, there's a lot of talk about all kind of criminal cases, but I want to say something. In the beginning, I did not understand and didn't agree. I didn't even pay much attention to what I saw at the Belts property in Cold Bay. But I remember the first time coming up the hill and I saw the flagpole with a flag on it. The sense of pride that I got at that point, Madam Chair Lady, I've never felt on Sint Maarten. Sadly, the flagpole more looks to me like the Washington Monument without a flag. So I'm asking the government to make the funds available to make sure that that flag is up on that pole, seeing that we already paid for it. Then, Madam Chair Lady, I know that, and I call on all citizens of the country, if you see a pipe is burst from GB somewhere, not because it's not your pipe, please call GB and let them know, because that is water that is being wasted and we pay for it. All those who have a bill end up paying for that either ways. Madam Chair Lady, a pipe up in St. Peter's was bust for 9 days. So to call on GB to take care of it as soon as they hear it, because they were told by my person. Then, Madam Chair Lady, on a good note, on the 12th of April, there's a book launch from our very own here, Brenda Maynard, and her co-writer, Rosalind A. Douglas, The Dark Side of Leadership, The Shining Light. So welcome everyone to come out, Paradise Hall in Cahill, from 4 to 7 on the 12th of April, Sunday. Come out and support, and I expect to see all members of Parliament there. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. The next MP to speak during notifications is MP Otley. MP Otley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good day to the viewing and listening public, my fellow colleague, the Honorable Minister of Finance and her support staff. Madam Chair, this notification I would like to start is actually for the public of St. Maarten, to notify them. I am not, I repeat, a part of this government. I am not a part of this coalition. I say this because when I go out and people see me day by day and say, what's going on, nothing going on, the country stagnant, this, that, no economic activities, I can only say, I can only make my mouth big, presents motions which are wishes, but if they don't want to be carried out by the government, they will not be carried out. GB saga, we have a Prime Minister, Governor saga, Prime Minister VSA saga, VSA Cabinet Staff saga. And I say to the members of Parliament, or members of coalition, silence is consent. And I remember through you, Madam Chair, that once it was sent where the government of St. Maarten sent to the Netherlands their for advice on ship jumping, and it was said by the Netherlands that you cannot hinder someone's democratic right, and I understand why. Because as a coalition member, if you see the ship steering into the iceberg, will you just let this country sink? Silence is consent. So to the members of the community, I am a member of opposition. I will fight and make my mouth big. But at this point, that's all I can do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Otley. The next MP to speak during notifications is MP Irian. MP Irian, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam President, SG, members of Parliament, to the Honourable Minister and her support staff, and the viewing public. Madam Chair, on May 6, 2024, the Prime Minister mentioned in at least 2 articles that one of the most urgent legislations that he'll be working on is the screening process for ministers. We are 2 years later with no update. We have the legislation for the fire department. We have legislation for the police. We have legislation that we have to work on for the big legislation to work on for the ambulance department. But, Madam Chair, the Prime Minister uses government limited resources on a petty internal beef, whereas when the topic was brought up, the Board of USM said, mind your business, we can handle it ourselves. But now you're fighting in public. So I can't mind my business and I don't care. So it's very contradicting. So Madam Chair, I would really like, and we have an MP that isn't here today, but is quick to talk about other MPs being childish, etc. And I think he's talking to the wrong individuals. And I hope that that MP is now talking to the coalition about their childish behaviors, because it looks very, very bad in public. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Irian. I see that MP Lewis wishes the floor for notification. MP Lewis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the Minister and her support staff. Good afternoon to my colleagues here and to the listening and viewing public. Madam Chair, I would like to also chime in based on what my MP Otley stated. I do also get that narrative that we are all in the same bucket Madam Chair, but the people of this country, yes, need to understand that from the floor of Parliament, that this side of the bench is indeed not part of the coalition, because we also get class as the individuals not doing anything for this country. We are doing our job. And I spoke with my staff earlier, and I told them when we put things on paper, we ain't putting it in no highfalutin words for the individuals out there that cannot understand. I will put it in words that the country have to understand, that when I, as an MP, hold my government accountable and I make any decision, that they do understand the reason why I am coming with what I am coming with. So, Madam Chair, I do agree with my MP Arian as well. We need to see something going on in this country. I mentioned it earlier that I do wish this minister also all the best, and that in another election that I also see her elected as an MP, as one of the ministers that I see doing her utmost best for this country. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Lewis. I continue and I give the floor to MP Doran for notifications. MP Doran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to my colleagues, the Honorable Minister Support Staff, and a special good afternoon to the people of Sint Maarten. Madam Chair, I would like to send out condolences on behalf of the National Alliance to our colleague MP York with the passing of his aunt, hence the reason he is not present today. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, MP Doran. Thank you all, members of Parliament, for your notifications. And we continue with the agenda points for this meeting. The agenda points for this meeting are the following. 1, the request for approval of the delegation for members of Parliament to participate in a workshop on care for Caribbean Parliamentarians from April 16th through 17th of this year in St. George's, Grenada. This document is registered on the 798 and is dated March 10th of 2026. Secondly, we have on the agenda discussion with the Minister of Finance on the future of the monetary union between Curacao and Sint Maarten and the role and functioning of the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten. This document is registered on the ISA 21 dated March 17th of this year. This agenda point, so agenda point number 2 on the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten, was requested by the members Labega, Kotai, Wever, Jansen-Webster, Roseburg, Peterson, Meyers, and the undersigned, myself. Going over to agenda point number 1, as I mentioned, this is a proposal for approval of the delegation, a delegation of Parliament to participate in a workshop on care for Caribbean parliamentarians from April 16th through 17th in St. George's, Grenada. This invitation was received on March 10th of this year, and it came from the Parliament of Grenada, Parliamericas, and UN Women Multi-Country Office, Caribbean, to participate in the Caribbean Parliamentary Workshop, Better Practices in Legislation, Policy, and Financing Subsidized Care Systems, using the 5R approach and principles, which will take place on April the 16th and 17th, as I mentioned. Building on past Parliamericas programming on this theme and drawing on United Nations Women MCO Caribbean's work under the Build Back Equal project, this meeting will explore key areas for parliamentary action to support the development, implementation, and oversight of comprehensive and inclusive care systems that meets the public needs and align with the 5R framework. As I mentioned, this document is registered on the IS 798. Before going over to the proposal in terms of the delegation, I think it's important, especially for the information of the general public, to understand what we're actually talking about here for this particular workshop. while of course it is well known that when it comes to training and the like for members of parliament is something that this parliament actively encourages. However, this particular workshop has another important dimension to it. Namely, it speaks to the 5R framework, and while the 5R framework is a generally acknowledged framework, in this case, it is framework for decent care work. And this is developed by the ILO and championed by UN Women, as I mentioned, which is part of this workshop coming up in Grenada. It is a comprehensive policy approach designed to achieve gender equality and decent work by transforming the care economy. It aims to recognize, reduce, and redistribute unpaid care while rewarding and representing paid care workers. The 5R generally stand for recognize, so recognize the need for care and for regulating care. It speaks to reducing, so decreasing the time spent on unpaid care work, redistribute, reward, and represent. This framework has also been put in a UN Women Toolkit, and it aims to transform care from an ignored, disproportionate burden on women into valued, shared, and supported function of society, according to the United Nations Women. So this proposal before us today to attend this workshop on care is to approve the work visit in order for a maximum of 4 members of parliament, as agreed to, each from a different faction, and the President of Parliament to attend this event on behalf of Parliament. As indicated previously, if Parliament is invited as a whole to a special meeting or gathering, only 4 members, excluding the President, each from a different faction, will be able to travel and attend the event. This will be done on a rotational basis based on the name of the faction in alphabetical order. And this rotational basis is also applicable for national holidays. This is a further clarification, members of Parliament, to the stipulations in the travel guidelines regarding when the entire Parliament is invited to an event abroad. As I mentioned, for Parliament, not only is this important as part of training of members of Parliament, but given the topic at hand, extremely timely as well. So considering the gender aspects of this workshop, the female members that attended the Parliamericas event in January 2026 and the factions that attended the last Parliamericas gathering in May 2025, the proposal is for the following delegation to attend this work visit. From the Women's Caucus, the members Ludmila de Wever and Wescot-Williams. The next faction up would have been the Sualiga Action Movement. This faction will not be participating. So the next one up would be a member from the United People's Party and a member of Parliament from the Unified Resilient Sint Maarten Movement. If these members accept their participation, or if one of these members do not, then the next faction up would be the Democratic Party. That's how the rotation is running. This delegation will be also including the President of Parliament, the Secretary General of Parliament, and a staff member of the Secretariat of Parliament. So we would have where, in the case of the, where Wescot-Williams, a member of the Women's Caucus, is also president, so her position in the Women's Caucus will be filled by another member of the Women's Caucus. The proposal is furthermore to approve the travel arrangements for this delegation and provisions for per diem in accordance with the travel guidelines of Parliament. The delegation is supposed to travel from April 14th through April the 17th, depending, of course, on flight availability. Does any member require the floor on this topic? We have MP Irian. MP Irian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, typically I would not be against such a travel, but in this case I am. I believe, and we heard from MP Utley and MP Linda Lewis, I believe that some members of Parliament perform way better when it comes to items not to do with Sint Maarten. I don't see and in addition to that, I can't trust that the other factions will be able to bring over the information that I would want from this workshop. And I don't even know if we have the right reasons to go. We don't have a budget 2025, we don't have an amendment, we don't have 2026. I know government is operating on the aspect of the 2025 budget and under the premise of only what is operational needed for the government to operate. So is Parliament also operating in that manner? Are we operating in the manner of only what we need to operate Parliament? Or do we have different rules for Parliament and the government? Chair, again, I don't even think we can afford the ticket prices since the oil going up, and I just don't see the benefit at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Irian, and your comments are noted. In as far as I know, and the same applies for Parliament and government, is that in the absence of an annual budget, the budget of the previous year will serve as the basis for the management. So it's not a matter of only operational, but it will serve as the basis for the management. That is in response to your question or query that you raised. Does any other member have required the floor on this matter? It does not appear to be the case. So if there are no further comments, the proposal as mentioned is approved. We go over to agenda point number 2, and that is a discussion with the Minister of Finance on the future of the monetary union between Curacao and Sint Maarten and the role and functioning of the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten. This document is registered on the ISA 21 of the 12th of March of this year. As mentioned, this agenda point 2 for this meeting was requested by MPs Labega, Kotai, Wever, Jansen-Webster, Roseburg, Peterson, Meyers, and Wescot-Williams. At this time, I would see if any of the requesters would like to take the floor to give a brief introduction to the request for this meeting. Does any of the requesters require that? That does not appear to be the case, so I now go over then to give the floor to the Minister of Finance, Ms. Marinka Gums, for some introductory remarks, and from what I see, a presentation as well. Minister of Finance, you have the floor.
Honorable Chair Lady, honorable members of Parliament, griffier, esteemed support staff, members in the public tribune, radio and social media viewers, residents of our beloved island, ladies and gentlemen, all under the sound of my voice, good afternoon and blessed day to all. Madam Chair, thank you for granting me the opportunity to address Parliament on a matter that strikes at the very core of our economic and financial stability, the current situation at the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten, the current tensions within our monetary union, and the implications of the Curacao government's statement intention to withdraw from the union. I am sure, Madam Chair, that we all know the popular saying, it takes two to tango. The truth of the matter, however, is that after 15 years of a marriage of convenience, some might even say an inconvenience, it seems like one partner is now dancing to a calypso tune, or more appropriately, the Sint Maarten rumba, while the other is doing the tumba. Whatever happened to the tango, then, you might ask, Madam Chair? That is a million-dollar question I am attempting to answer in this address. This is therefore not a routine briefing. We find ourselves in a moment of national significance. The decisions we take together in the coming days, months, and years will shape the financial architecture of Sint Maarten for decades. They will determine how we safeguard our financial stability, how we protect our banking sector, and how we ensure that the savings and pensions of our people are secure. I will, as usual, Madam Chair, speak candidly, plainly, and as clearly as possible. I will outline the legal foundation of the CBCS, assess how it has functioned since its establishment, identify the controversies that have plagued it, and address the imbalances that have characterized our monetary union. I will also explain why, in my humble opinion, Curacao is now signaling its desire to exit the union and what mechanisms exist for such a dissolution. Finally, I will detail the proactive steps the government of Sint Maarten is already taking, including the imminent establishment of a dedicated task force to ensure that our country is fully prepared for all possible outcomes. The legal foundation and establishment of the CBCS. Madam Chair, the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten was established on October 10, 2010, following the dissolution of the Netherlands Antilles. However, both Curacao and Sint Maarten has agreed to its establishment since November 2008. Its legal foundation rests primarily on the Central Bank Statute for Curacao and Sint Maarten, 2010, the National Ordinance on the Supervision of Banking and Credit Institutions, the National Ordinance on Foreign Exchange Transactions, all the above anchored in Article 38 of the Kingdom Charter that states, and I quote, 1, the Netherlands, Aruba, Curacao, and Sint Maarten can make arrangements among themselves, and 2, by mutual consultation, it can be determined that such an arrangement and any amendments thereto shall be established by Kingdom Act or General Measure of Kingdom Administration. The main points of the CBCS statute can be summarized as follows. Purpose and agreement. In the negotiations leading up to 10-10-10, the island territories of Curacao and Sint Maarten agreed on November 26, 2008 to establish a joint central bank and related regulations. The bank is set up as a public legal entity serving both countries. The currency and monetary policy. As per said agreement, there will be one currency area with a single currency, which is now the Caribbean guilder. The currency will have a fixed exchange rate relative to the US dollar. The core responsibilities. The main tasks of the CBCS include the monetary supervision, economic oversight, integrity supervision of the financial sector, stability and oversight. The bank also ensures external value stability of the currency and health of the financial system, including managing foreign exchange reserves and ensuring a sound and efficient payment system. Madam Chair, after the dismantling of the Netherlands Antilles, and specifically the Central Bank of the Netherlands Antilles, the CBCS was conceived as a joint institution, reflecting the principle of equality between Curacao and Sint Maarten. In theory, it was to serve both countries independently and impartially, with balanced representation and shared consensus decision-making. In practice, however, the experience of the past 15 years have shown that the structure and operations of the CBCS have not always reflected this ideal. How has the CBCS functioned since 2010? To be honest, Madam Chair, I can only give the CBCS a mixed performance report from its establishment. But to understand this properly, we need to take a good look at its governance structure. Governance structure of the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten, the legal status. The bank, as I have said before, Madam Chair, is established as a public legal entity jointly owned by Curacao and Sint Maarten. Decision-making. All decisions are made on the basis of parity between two countries. This is to ensure equal representation and influence in governance matters. Very critical to this issue of parity is the process of making appointments to the Supervisory Board of Directors, the chairmanship of the board, and to the management board, among others. Supervisory role. The bank is charged with monetary supervision, which managing currency and monetary stability, economic supervision, monitoring macroeconomic conditions, and integrity supervision, ensuring ethical conduct in the financial sector. Currency oversight. Similarly, the bank maintains the external value of the Caribbean guilder. It ensures the health of the financial system through regulatory oversight. Ministerial oversight. The ministers of finance of both Curacao and Sint Maarten are involved in oversight and coordination. The CBCS statute defines the roles of both individual ministers based on joint decisions. And operational independence. While jointly governed, the bank operates with a degree of autonomy to fulfill its mandate effectively. Against this background, Madam Chair, the CBCS has had moments of stability, but its overall performance has been uneven. Several issues have repeatedly surfaced. Let me highlight some of them here. Governance imbalances. From the onset, the Supervisory Board of Directors has been dominated by Curacao, although the CBCS statute calls for equal representation. The political reality thus far has been that Curacao has had a more significant influence and control. The current tension, it seems to me, has emerged because of Sint Maarten's assertiveness to ensure that the spirit and letter of the CBCS statute are upheld where it concerns the configuration of the Supervisory Board of Directors. You will recall, Madam Chair, that not too long ago, my head was literally on the chopping block for my audacity to grab the bull by the horns where the SBOD had, at best, been dragging its feet concerning the appointment of its chair. Of course, the status quo favors Curacao, and whatever blame we could assign to Sint Maarten for not ensuring that it has its full complement of 3 members on the SBOD, the fact still remains that even if it did, the chairperson has always been from Curacao. I will not belabor this issue any further, but suffice to say, Madam Chair, that we are where we are now today because Curacao believes that due to its larger population, a larger financial sector, and its majority shareholding in the CBCS, all of these should translate into it having full control. It's like going into a marital union in which the partner that makes the largest contribution calls all the shots. That was never the intention when Sint Maarten agreed to establishing a joint central bank with Curacao. Madam Chair, the argument of size has always resulted in a might is right attitude, at least from the vantage point of the smaller partner. It is what led to the dissolution of the West Indies Federation. It is what forced Aruba to leave the 6-island constellation of the Netherlands Antilles. In fact, it is what shattered the so-called Antilles of 5, resulting in the ultimate breakup of the Netherlands Antilles. I might add, Madam Chair, it is also what continues to call into question our so-called equal partnership within the kingdom, something we now refer to as a democratic deficit. I say all this to say, Madam Chair, that the current imbalance in our relationship with Curacao in the CBCS was foreseen. The wisdom of the remedy the architects of the union offered was in forcing both countries to make joint decisions based on consensus. It worked reasonably well when the imbalance was tolerated. But once Sint Maarten began to demand equality as envisaged in the CBCS statute, the divisions became more glaring. But the truth of the matter, Madam Chair, is that the imbalance has affected appointment processes, strategic decision-making, responsiveness to Sint Maarten's concerns, and allocation of institutional attention and resources. Supervisory shortcomings. The CBCS has faced criticism for delayed or insufficient supervisory interventions, most notably in the Enya case. Warning signs were present for years, yet decisive action came only after the situation had deteriorated significantly. communication and transparency issues. The CBCS has often been slow to communicate with Sint Maarten's authorities, particularly during crisis. Key information has not always been shared in a timely or comprehensive manner. 4, policy divergence. Curaçao's economic structure, more industrial, more diversified, and more dependent on large corporate entities, differs significantly from Sint Maarten's tourism-driven economy. Yet, monetary and supervisory policies have not always reflected these differences. Also, Madam Chair, it would seem that Sint Maarten's traditional role of contributing significantly to the much-needed foreign exchange receipts of the central bank through its mature tourism industry may have diminished somewhat by the recent emergence of Curacao as a major tourist destination in the region. This newfound foreign exchange generating source could have led Curaçao's government no longer needing Sint Maarten. In other words, since we don't need Sint Maarten that much for its foreign exchange contributions, we might as well go our separate ways. That is what I call dancing to the Tumba beat, Madam Chair. Operational centralization. Madam Chair, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that despite being a joint institution, the CBCS has remained heavily Curacao-centric in its operations, staffing, and decision-making culture. These issues have contributed to a perception widely shared among stakeholders in Sint Maarten that the CBCS has not functioned as a truly equal binational institution. Controversial issues. Since its inception, Madam Chair, several controversies have shaped the trajectory of the CBCS and strained the monetary union. The ENIA debacle. The collapse of ENIA is the most significant financial crisis in the history of the CBCS. It exposed weak supervisory oversight, delayed intervention, inadequate risk management, insufficient protection of policyholders. For Sint Maarten, the consequences have been severe. Thousands of our people have seen their pensions and life savings placed at risk. The restructuring plan has imposed heavy financial burdens, and the future of key assets, most notably Mullet Bay, remains uncertain. The Mullet Bay issue. Mullet Bay is not merely a real estate property. It is a national symbol, the patrimony of the people, which was once the engine of our tourism development and which can be reactivated to fire up Sint Maarten's economic growth. Yet, its fate has been entangled in the ENIA restructuring process, which decisions mostly influenced by Curacao-based institutions and actors. Sint Maarten has repeatedly expressed frustration with the slow pace of resolution, the lack of timely communication and transparency, the limited influence we have had over decisions affecting our own national asset. Governance disputes. The composition and functioning of the SBOD have been a recurring source of tension. The Sint Maarten members have often found itself outvoted or sidelined on matters of strategic importance. Monetary policy and rigidity. The CBCS has been slow to modernize its monetary policy framework, even as global financial systems have evolved rapidly. This rigidity has limited the ability of Sint Maarten to respond effectively to economic shocks. Madam Chair, it may be intrusive for us at this juncture to consider the fact that the CBCS is not the sole entity in terms of multi-island financial regulatory bodies in the region. The East Caribbean Central Bank comprises of 8 island jurisdictions, has existed for over 40 years. A comparison of both institutions may contribute to our understanding of our present predicament. Comparison between CBCS and ECCB. Both serve multi-state currency unions. Both differ significantly in governance structure, scope, and regional integration. The ECCB governs 8 countries with a more centralized and formalized governance framework, while CBCS operates under parity-based decision-making between 2 nations. The key difference is there are 3 major differences between both institutions, Madam Chair. These are: 1, regional integration. The ECCB is deeply embedded in OECS frameworks with harmonized laws and shared institutions. CBCS is more bilateral and tailored to the needs of 2 countries. 2, governance complexity. ECCB has a multi-tiered governance system with formal committees and councils. CBCS relies on parity and joint oversight, which may be simpler but less scalable. 3, currency implementation. ECCB has a long-established EC dollar with strong foreign reserve backing. CBCS has just transitioned to the new Caribbean guilder with fixed exchange rates with the US dollar. Strategic implementations. My apologies, strategic implications. ECCB's model offers broader regional resilience, pooled resources, and harmonized financial reforms. CBCS's structure allows for tailored oversight, but has faced challenges in scalability and coordination. Who has benefited the most from CBCS? Madam Chair, this is a question several sectors of Sint Maarten, or of the Sint Maarten community, have been asking. As I said before, it is important to speak plainly. In my own assessment, Curacao has benefited more from the CBCS than Sint Maarten. Here are the reasons why I have arrived at such a conclusion. A, larger financial sector, larger influence. Curacao's financial sector is significantly larger than ours, and as a result, more supervisory attention is directed toward institutions on Curacao, more policy decisions are shaped by Curacao's economic needs, and Curacao stakeholders have greater influence over the CBCS's agenda. B, operational centralization. The CBCS's headquarters, staff, and operational infrastructure are overwhelmingly located in Curacao. Sint Maarten only has a branch office. This has created much greater employment benefits for Curacao, greater institutional influence, greater access to information and decision makers. Crisis management. During financial crisis, Curacao institutions have often received more immediate attention and support. The Enya case is a prime example. Although Sint Maarten's citizens are deeply affected, decision-making has been dominated by Curacao's interests. Monetary policy alignment has tended to reflect Curacao's economic structure more than ours. This has sometimes left Sint Maarten with policies that do not fully align with our economic realities. These imbalances are not theoretical, they are systemic, lived experiences that have shaped our economic trajectory for over 15 years. Why does Curacao now want out of the monetary union? In my humble view, Madam Chair, Curacao's stated intention to begin the process of possibly leaving the monetary union is driven by several concrete factors. 1, desire for full monetary control. Curacao has expressed a desire to control its own monetary policy, set its own interest rates, and manage its own currency. Fiscal pressures. Curacao faces significant fiscal challenges, including a skyrocketing public debt and structural deficits. Some policymakers obviously believe that a national central bank could provide more flexibility. Political dynamics. There is a growing sentiment in Curacao that the monetary union no longer serves its interests as effectively as it once did. Enya fallout. The Enya crisis has undoubtedly strained relations within the union. Curacao may believe that a national central bank would allow it to manage such crises more independently. Divergent economic paths. Curacao's economy has evolved differently from ours. Some in Curacao argue that a shared monetary policy is no longer optimal for the island to achieve its goals. These factors, Madam Chair, have created a political environment in which withdrawal from the union is increasingly seen as a viable option. Dismantling experiences are useful. Madam Chair, we have been through a similar situation before with the dismantling of the Netherlands Antilles. So in essence, or in a sense, we have a blueprint that could be used should Curacao step out of the CBCS monetary union. It will be recalled that with the dismantling of the Netherlands Antilles, also the Central Bank of the Netherlands Antilles was dissolved in 2010, resulting in Curacao and Sint Maarten inherited the Netherlands Antillean guilder, Aruba kept its own florin, and the best islands dollarized. From that experience, the lesson we learned, at least for me, is that currencies follow political structures. When the structure changes, the currency must be reassigned, replaced, or retired. However, the current case of Curacao potentially bidding farewell to the CBCS monetary union does not in itself imply a change of political structure. Rather, it seems to respond to other dynamics. In any case, a dissolution of the current monetary union will be legally and operationally complex. It would involve division of assets and liabilities. Madam Chair, before we can even proceed to deciding on who gets what, we must be clear about the ownership structure of the CBCS. The statute defines Curacao and Sint Maarten as gerechtigde partijen, entitled parties, meaning, in my opinion, they are co-owners of the central bank. They each hold a proportion of the bank's equity determined by the agreements between the two countries. This ownership structure is the foundation for how dissolution is handled. Such dissolution, Madam Chair, will therefore include a division of the foreign exchange reserves, gold reserves, real estate holdings, including Mullet Bay, financial instruments, operational assets. The CBCS statute provides a clear process if a country decides to abandon the monetary union. I need to repeat. The CBCS statute provides a clear process if a country decides to abandon the monetary union. The departing country must fulfill all outstanding obligations to the bank, cooperate in an orderly transition to its own currency or monetary authority. Similarly, Madam Chair, the CBCS must calculate the departing country's equity share, including paid-in capital, general reserves, revaluation reserves, retained earnings. Naturally, Madam Chair, the departing country is entitled to its proportional share of the bank's equity. This will be paid out after all obligations are settled and after the bank ensures financial stability. The remaining country may, if it so decides, continue with what is left of the bank as a national central bank only after the settlement is complete. This prevents either country from walking away with more or less than its fair share. But if Curacao and Sint Maarten jointly decide to end the union, the bank must be liquidated. All assets and liabilities shall be divided according to the shareholder arrangement. Currency transition. Madam Chair, in the event Curacao decides to opt out of the monetary union, Sint Maarten would need to decide whether to, 1, introduce its own national currency, adopt an existing currency or foreign currency, example, the US dollar, the euro, or enter a new monetary arrangement. Establishment of a central bank of Sint Maarten. This would require legislation and active supervision and enforcement if necessary, staffing, infrastructure, international recognition, monetary policy frameworks. Banking sector adjustments. Commercial banks would need to update systems, adjust liquidity management, transition payment systems, adapt to new regulatory frameworks. And legal mechanisms. Madam Chair, the dissolution would require amendments to the central bank statute, bilateral agreements, international notifications, transitional arrangements. This is a complex process that could take many months to tackle, but it is manageable with proper planning, which is what this government is committed to doing. Our proactive approach, a proposed task force on monetary future and financial stability. Madam Chair, the government of Sint Maarten is not waiting for events to overtake us. We are taking decisive action. The Council of Ministers is set to establish a task force on monetary future and financial stability, which will be mandated to, 1, align with stakeholders like the International Monetary Funds, CBCS, etc. 2, evaluate the current monetary union. 3, assess the implications of a potential dissolution. 4, examine currency options. 5, develop scenarios for establishing a national central bank. 6, analyze impacts on the banking sector and payment systems. 7, provide concrete recommendations to the government on a possible path forward. This task force will engage local experts, regional partners, and international institutions. Its work will be thorough, independent, and aligned with global best practices. Madam Chair, allow me to state here categorically that we are not reacting to events, we are preparing for them. We are not passive, we are proactive, we are not waiting, we are moving. Guiding principles of Sint Maarten's position. Our approach is guided by 5 core principles. Stability first. For us, Madam Chair, financial stability is paramount. Any dismantling has to be properly prepared and must never, ever jeopardize the financial stability of our nation in any way. 2, transparency and accountability. We will demand full transparency from the CBCS and from our partners in the monetary union. Equal partnership. Madam Chair, I am not given to any kind of political posturing or making bravado statements, but I can assure Parliament, the honorable members of Parliament through you, that we will not accept any subordinate role in this unfolding saga. Protection of the interests of Sint Maarten, its people and economy. Continuous supervision of financial institutions will remain a priority, alongside advancing the necessary legislation before Parliament to meet the requirements of the Financial Action Task Force and to facilitate innovation within Sint Maarten's financial sector. We will also move forward with the implementation of a deposit guarantee scheme to safeguard the savings of our people of up to 50,000 guilders, as well as the introduction of the basic payment account. I can assure Parliament of our full commitment to these measures. Preparedness. If we put aside the legal language, Madam Chair, the logic is simple. You can't just walk away from a joint central bank, and certainly not after 15 years. If the union ends, we must negotiate the following: who takes which assets, who assumes which risks and obligations, and how to protect people's deposits, contracts, and confidence. The statute and its implementing laws do not lock Curacao and Sint Maarten into this monetary union forever. So, Madam Chair, we know from the experience of the Central Bank of the Netherlands Antilles that we entered into the union with our eyes wide open until something do us part. And that something is already knocking at our door, Madam Chair. We will answer the door knowingly or knowing fully well that any dismantling has to be deliberated, legally structured, and financially fair. We will be ready for any and all outcomes. Madam Chair, the challenges before us are significant, but they are not insurmountable. Next to the dismantling of the Netherlands Antilles and the Central Bank of the Netherlands Antilles, Sint Maarten has faced adversities like hurricanes, economic shocks, institutional crisis before, and each time we have emerged stronger. This moment requires unity, resolve, and clarity of purpose. It requires us to stand firm in defense of our national interest. It requires us to prepare not out of fear, but out of responsibility. We will not be rushed. We will not be sidelined. We will not be bullied. We will not compromise the interests of our people. We will act decisively. We will protect our financial stability. We will uphold good governance, and we will ensure that Sint Maarten's future is secure, stable, and prosperous. Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you to the members of Parliament for your patience and understanding. The time to set aside our political differences, close ranks, and rally round for the defense of Sint Maarten's interests is now. I look forward to any questions or clarifications you may have. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Finance, Minister Gums, and for that presentation and the information provided on this topic. I now look at the members of Parliament, and I see we have MP Duran. MP Duran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually pressed the button right after the first agenda point ended. I have a more technical parliamentary question to you, Madam Chair. Based on agenda point number 1, MP Irian expressed his disagreement with the travel, and you then proceed to go over to agenda point number 2 when nobody else had a comment. So my question to you, Madam Chair, if nobody else had a comment, that means unanimously the Parliament is in agreement with the stance of MP Irian. Can I get some clarity on that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, MP Duran. If the clarity that you want is whether your assertion is correct or not, it is not correct. We are in a central committee meeting, and there are no specific rules regarding how a voting go. MP Irian not only made a statement about not being in agreement, he made several insinuations about it. For example, whether we should be going, and whether the factions, whether all factions should not be represented. So it wasn't only I don't really agree. It was I don't agree with it, and because of XYZ. I asked, following his comments, I asked if there was any other comment. There was no other comment, assuming that the majority of persons were in favor with the proposal that was on the table. So that is my answer to your question, MP Duran. We go over with the agenda point, and again, because it's a central committee, I went back to the issue because you raised it, because the central committee, again, the rules are a little more flexible than had it been a public meeting in which the rules in terms of voting and the for and against and how many for, how many against, they're very clear. It's one of the few things, one of the few items that actually the support, the approval of the central committee is necessary when it comes to travel. That is stated specifically to be the case. But again, rules regarding how that voting take place are not established as part of the central committee meetings. So with that elucidation, I would go over, or continue rather, and I see MP Kotai have the floor. MP Kotai, you are on the agenda point that we're on. You have the floor. Just wanted to know if you had comments about the first agenda point too. MP Kotai, you have the floor. We're on the central bank issue, following the introduction on the topic by the Minister of Finance, and MP Kotai, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the Minister and her support staff, to those tuning in, and to my colleagues here on the floor of Parliament. I would like to address several critical concerns surrounding the central bank, the ENYA resolution, and the broader future of our monetary union. To begin, the CBCS incurred an expense of approximately 15 million guilders for the transition from the Netherlands Antillian guilder to the Caribbean guilder just about 1 year ago. While this remains an operational cost of the CBCS, it is clearly understood that these costs indirectly affect the people of Sint Maarten and Curacao. Additionally, the CBCS has committed to accepting the old Antillian notes for a period of 30 years. How will this obligation be honored if the CBCS is dissolved and each country is left to operate independently? Yes, you did mention that there would be a division of assets and liabilities, but with that said, I do have further questions around that. So following the seizure of ENYA Carib investments in 2018 due to mismanagement, a 50-year resolution plan was established to safeguard pensioners. Under the plan, Sint Maarten is expected to contribute 2.3 million guilders annually starting in 2027, totaling approximately of 115 million guilders through 2077. Curacao is committed to 30 million annually in guilders, totaling 1.5 billion guilders through 2077. It has also been noted that ENIA contributes approximately 16.6 million guilders annually in social premiums to Curacao, effectively reducing its net fiscal burden to 13.4 million guilders, though the full contribution remains 30 million guilders. In continuation, as per prior agreements, the CBCS was expected again to contribute the 15 million annually for 50 years to the resolution funds, which leads to my question. If the role of the CBCS is changed or moved, who assumes responsibility for this annual contribution? At the heart of this matter lies a deficit of approximately 1 billion guilders. So with any change to its role, who continues the recovery process? Who is accountable for pursuing former directors and shareholders? The CBCS has stated its intention to continue recovery proceedings. But how will that commitment materialize if its authority is altered or removed? The CBCS also maintains control over the Mullet Bay property in Sint Maarten through its oversight of ENIA restructuring. Since 2018, under court-appointed emergency measures, CBCS appointed management has been tasked with preparing for a tender process for the sale. Now, some concerns, of course, Sint Maarten requested a right of first refusal, as we all know, and the valuation stands at approximately 90 million guilders, significantly lower than prior appraisals. How will any restructuring or dissolution of the CBCS impact the timing, control, and valuation of this critical national asset? Separately, the CBCS reportedly sold 30% of its gold reserves in 2024. I stand corrected if I'm wrong. Reallocating proceeds into fixed income instruments such as U.S. government bonds. Given the rise in gold prices since then, I must ask, did this decision yield stronger returns or did it result in lost opportunity value? This is directly relevant because under Article 40 of the CBCS Charter, profits determine annual dividend payments to Sint Maarten and Curacao. At the same time, Sint Maarten is expected to contribute approximately 1.1 million USD annually to the ENIA resolution. This amount is expected to be withheld from its CBCS dividend. Therefore, we must review the CBCS dividend performance over the last 3 to 5 years and assess whether its investment strategy is strengthening or weakening national revenues. While we may be approaching the situation tactically, others may be approaching it strategically. If we agree to changes or dissolution at this stage, responsibility gaps may emerge, financial obligations may shift unpredictably, and strategic assets may be compromised. And ultimately, the burden will fall on the taxpayer. To close, can one country unilaterally withdraw from the monetary union without the consent of the other? Just want clarity on that. And what legal framework governs such unilateral withdrawal? In closing, I respectfully request sometime in the future a formal parliamentary debate on dollarization versus retaining the guilder, supported by independent and politically unaffiliated consultancy firms, presenting opposing views, of course. And that would be it for me, Madam Chair. I just look forward to the responses.
Thank you, MP Kotai. I now continue with the members of Parliament and invite MP La Cruz to take the floor.
A blessed afternoon, Madam Chair Lady Griffier, Minister and her support staff once again, my fellow colleagues, those listening on social media and those in the Tribune. Madam Chair Lady, I first want to make this statement, which is clear. I, Francisco Alberto La Cruz, stand with Sint Maarten. And anyone that stands with Sint Maarten, I stand with them. Okay? So the fact that the minister states that she will not be bullied, I stand 100% for Sint Maarten. And anyone that stands with Sint Maarten, we will not accept anyone bullying us in any way whatsoever. But before we go there, Madam Chair Lady, I have a couple questions. And the first question I'm going to ask, because this started, the whole commotion started with the appointment of a director and whose turn it was. Is it Sint Maarten's turn? Is it Curaçao's turn? Madam Chair Lady, through this whole confusion that we've had here on Sint Maarten, at no point we heard one word from Curaçao, the Minister of Finance of Curaçao, or anyone in government or parliament concerning what was happening here. Because, Madam Chair Lady, if I believe I have the right to put a chair, and I am going through hell because of who I put or how I put it, and you say nothing in this whole process, then explain me how can it be possible that I don't have the chair? Because the first thing I would have called out and say, hey, but you in confusion there and heat for a chair that you don't even have the right. This is our turn to bring the chair. But nothing was said. Madam Chair Lady, what I would like to see is the minutes of those meetings. Because I want to know if the minister, ex-minister in Curaçao is telling lies, or if it's my minister telling me fibs. I want to know what's going on. Because we reach a point now where something that seemed stable is now one bubble. And the only thing I am hearing is about cost, and more cost for Sint Maarten. Again, I say, Madam Chair Lady, and I don't want anyone to twist my words, I stand with Sint Maarten. The Prime Minister made a comment once that I laughed when he said, Mullet Bay is in Sint Maarten and it stays in Sint Maarten. So whatever happens, make sure Mullet Bay stays for Sint Maarten. Madam Chair Lady, looking at numbers, I want to understand this. We own or we receive a percentage from the income from Central Bank. Okay? If I'm not mistaken, it's 22.2%. I stand to be corrected. How much of the income generated in Central Bank, what is that percentage that comes from Sint Maarten? I'm curious to know that. And I want to know if the minister can give us a breakdown, looking at the numbers from the last 3 years, if we had our own central bank, also paying attention to the cost of running a central bank, what would it have meant for us? Would we be in red or not? Madam Chair Lady, if it's one thing I can't stand, it's big people trying to make people look like liars. That is one thing that has grind me. And it was fun and giggling and laughing, but I didn't appreciate it. At no point you will be laughing and giggling at none of my ministers here in Sint Maarten. I don't care if they're opposition or not, or if I is opposition and they're in my party, this is Sint Maarten. So, Minister, I am begging you to come to Parliament and show us exactly what took place there, because you have been silent about it. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. I continue and I give the floor to MP Lewis. MP Lewis, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, will be brief. Minister, I do totally agree with the last speaker. We have, how we say, the Netherlands Antilles was dissolved in 10-10-10. We finally come with our beautiful Caribbean Gilda, etc. And then to see the different things going on with the Minister of Finance, the acting Minister of Finance, and also the Prime Minister. Minister, we have an autonomy, a separate status. And just like how we have separated from the then Netherlands Antilles, which the Hoofdstad was Willemstad, Curacao, I think it's important that we do indeed follow suit with what the intentions of the Prime Minister, but our rightful shares should be divided rightfully. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Lewis. I do see MP Veronica wishing to take the floor. MP Veronica Jansen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues. Good afternoon, Chair Lady Griffier, and good afternoon and welcome to the Minister of Finance and her support staff. I do not have many questions. I just wanted to know, I saw the back and forth basically with the ministers in Curacao indicating that at no time was it that Sint Maarten was supposed to have the presidency now, and also about who suggested the presidency and who didn't suggest, etc. My question is, did the current Minister of Finance have a discussion with the former Minister of Finance in Sint Maarten to find out what was agreed? Because if it was done before your time, did you find out what was agreed? Also, I know you mentioned that there's going to be a task force to do all the calculations, but just if you know what is a ballpark figure of the liabilities, and also, is the division 2080? What is the division of assets right now? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Veronica Jansen. The next MP to speak is MP Labega. MP Labega, you have the floor. But before you start, MP Labega, members of Parliament, of course, you know, I can understand the need for a little internal caucusing, but somehow the sound comes over kind of loud. So I just wanted you to be aware of that as you speak to one another in the where you're sitting. MP Labega, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon once again to the Minister and support staff. Minister, thank you for the presentation. I'm very happy to see that we are being proactive in this matter. You know, many times, even as members of Parliament and ministers, where we're discussing different laws and different procedures, we always mention other countries. What is Curacao doing? What is Aruba doing? How is it over there? How is it over there? I think it's time for us to reassess and analyze what's best for us in Sint Maarten. And there's nothing wrong with revisiting a situation, a relationship. It's time for that. Is it the best thing to go left? Is it the best thing to go right? Is it the best thing to remain? Or in time, move on? There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm glad that there will be a task force that will assess the situation non-emotionally. You know, we can't get caught up with Curacao released this, so we're reacting to what they say or what we hear. We have to react and move forward responsibly, in a responsible manner, and make the best decisions for Sint Maarten and her people. So I'm glad to hear that we are being proactive, and let us not get caught up with what Curacao is saying for us to react to them. We need to move forward what's best for us and see where we are. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Labega. Does any other MP request or require the floor? I don't see it noted in any case. To the Minister. Minister, I want to thank you for your presentation and government's view in terms of going forward. This is definitely not somewhat. Is the government and the Ministry of Finance receptive to investigating how such assessment, and it should be done periodically going forward, of a periodic assessment of the ENIA agreement, again through a Sint Maarten lens, could take place. One of my colleagues asked about it, and I would just like to emphasize the question regarding any further developments on Mullet Bay. And thirdly, with what is going on, and I think we need to be very clear as well as we hear things from the other partner in the monetary union, who we hear it from, and what exactly is being said. So we heard the reactions, Minister, and I'm not even going in the part about the chair, who, when, whose turn it is, because I have explained publicly as well that that is a very gray area. What we do know, based on the charter, is that there should be 6 members of the board of the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten. And that at least, or not at least, actually it's required, 5/6 of those, so 5 of the 6 actually, should make a recommendation on a chairperson. Now, how would something like that go in practice? One might ask, since you had this gentleman's agreement about a rotating chairperson. Whether from Curacao or Sint Maarten, the board has to identify potential candidates for chair. So the 6 members, with a majority of at least 5 of them, should identify out of potential candidates the person that they want to recommend for chair. What would happen in practice is that I guess the board and board members would whisper in the ear of their minister, or their minister could whisper in the ear of their members of the board. What do you think about this person or that person? But at the end of the day, this whispering is nowhere formally regulated. And then when you get persons, let's say somebody from Sint Maarten, so actually a Sint Maartener being proposed by Curacao, that person might easily be considered somebody of Sint Maarten, by Sint Maarten, as chair. And I think, and I'm going to be specific because it is known that the person of the former Prime Minister of Curacao, Etienne Ace, and his appointment as chair found itself exactly in that kind of gray area. But so he was proposed by Sint Maarten, but I think in the back of many persons' mind, it was like, but he's from Curacao. So that, and again, that is nowhere regulated absolutely. And I'm not going to rehash the whole story, but I think we should be aware of it in terms of getting to the appointment of board members self. 3 for Sint Maarten, 3 for Curacao. You have 6 of them. They are to recommend. They are to recommend to the ministers, who then jointly have to agree who they would like, or who they recommend for chair. And then the board ministers, again, they need to nominate that person to their council of ministers, which will then approve the chair, and we get the national decrees, etc., from Curacao and Sint Maarten. So unless there is a level of understanding and trust and wanting to work together on the basis of that, we're going to continue having issues. We're going to continue having issues. So again, for me, what is important, more important than actually who nominates or not, or nominated or not, the chair of the board of the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten is that we have a capable person there, understanding his or her role, and it ain't about Curacao or Sint Maarten only, it's about a monetary union. And as long as we can't get to that place, we're going to have a problem with the monetary union. So coming back to my initial statement, politicians on Sint Maarten and Curacao are going to say what they think they should at any given time for their reasons. It happens here, it happens in Curacao. And so my question, haven't heard what a prime minister, and then just maybe, Minister, let me insert a question here. With what has been stated publicly by the Prime Minister of Curacao, has anything formal been communicated to you, the minister, or our Prime Minister? Because now this thing seems to have gone a level higher than the formal representatives of the central bank, which are the ministers of finance. So has anything been communicated based on the statement? So or you just know of the statement that it is the view of the Prime Minister and maybe the Council of Ministers of Curacao that this relationship is not working? Has that been communicated in any formal fashion or not? And how is that affecting, if at all, the current operations? You know, so are we looking, how does the board stand? Are they functioning? Have they gotten any kind of directives? So don't let us go chase. Let us be prepared for sure, but not chase these statements and sound bites maybe that we're hearing and picking up. But I'm extremely interested in how are the current operations going as far as you know, Minister, because you're not in the board, you're not in management, but from your perspective, as the Minister of Finance, how are the operations currently going? You know, what's happening? I saw the IMF report regarding the central bank. Have you been informed of this report? Are they going to be reporting to you, Minister, and your colleague in Curacao about carrying out the recommendations on the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten by the IMF report? You know, so how is the current operation being affected or not by what is happening here? And Minister, if you had to go back and look through the archives, etc., how diligent was the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten in preparing the branch in Sint Maarten to be a much more full-fledged central banking operation? How many of our people here have been prepared by the central bank, you know, to not only man the branch here, but actually to carry out some of the tasks, as many of the tasks as we are able to on Sint Maarten, where central banking is concerned. So, yeah, so Minister, if you can respond to these matters for me, I would greatly thank you. I see we do have another MP to speak, and that's MP Roseburg, to whom I give the floor at this time. MP Roseburg.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Blessed afternoon to my honorable colleagues and Minister of Finance and the support staff and the persons in the public tribune and the ones listening online. I have heard the presentation on the possible future of the central bank. Seeing what the chair lady also brought forward, I had a question about the current situation because, yeah, we can't look into the future. And I would like to know where we're standing now. I have seen, like my other colleagues most probably, the online discussions. But what I would like to know is the current state of affairs. I would like to know in regards to the current temporary board members, are they going to be appointed as official board members? That's what I would like to know. That's a pending question of mine for a long time. So I would like to know what the stance is on that, especially seeing the presentation being brought forward on the future status of the central bank. So what will happen with the temporary, and will we be at full capacity of 3 board members? And will the temporary board members be appointed as official board members? And has there be a third one as well, so that we are at full capacity? I'm asking that because if we have a future as provided by you, through you, Madam Chair, then I believe if we would have to have negotiations, we need to be at full capacity. And I would like to know if that is being done. Other than that, I also would like to know, is there currently communication, or is it only in press releases, and if there is currently no communication, what will be done to establish communication so that if the solution is, or if the end conclusion is indeed that we would have to separate ties, then at least communication needs to take place to come to that conclusion. So I want to know if the two countries are on speaking terms, and if not, what will be done to make sure that that takes place. I don't like to use the word mediation, but are we at the stage of mediation? And if so, when will such mediation start? And if not, is that something that is being considered to come to a solution that benefits Sint Maarten? Other than that, chairmanship is still a conversation, and we have seen the different articles, we have seen the different standpoints, we have seen the different social media posts also by the previous finance minister of Curacao, and yes, I think one of the other MPs mentioned it in regards to wanting to see the minutes. But for me, it's very much important to know where it went wrong so that we know how this cannot take place in the future again, because the chair lady mentioned a scenario. I don't know if that is the scenario that took place, but I do think it's important for us to know where the kink in the cable is, so that in the future, when we state something, it is indeed what we state, and not that nobody can be stating that it's different. So therefore, it's important to go back and to make sure that we know the facts from then, to know how we can prevent them from happening in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Roseburg. I don't see any other member except MP Doran at this time, so I give the floor to MP Doran. MP Doran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Good day once again to everyone tuned in. A special shout out to the people of Sint Maarten that are following this meeting. Madam Chair, I love Tumba, but I love Sint Maarten Rumba more. All I heard, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister, in this whole presentation was Curacao, 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 Curacao. And in my humble opinion, our only plan is to put together a task force. Another one? Madam Chair, I try to, decipher what the real issue is, because for me, according to me, I didn't remember during the last 2 years this government ever complaining about the central bank. For me, everything was working well. The only thing that was in our disadvantage, and that was a disadvantage that the government put on the government, by extension the people of Sint Maarten, is not appointing permanent board members. That was on us. So I'm not talking about chairmanship, I'm talking about the appointment of the Sint Maarten professionals that have not been appointed as yet. That was the only issue. So a self-created, self-inflicted issue. Madam Chair, through you to the Minister, I have a couple of questions. Minister, during your presentation, you mentioned that Curacao wants full power. And for me, I would like to know if you can clarify what you mean by that. And goes back to my previous point where you didn't even appoint the Sint Maarten board members. So we are basically feeding into giving them this power that you were speaking of. I would like some clarity on that, please. Madam Chair, I would like to understand something, because for me, all of this started with the whole appointment of Mr. Bloom. So today we are here at war, basically with Curacao, our sister island, because of one man, one appointment, one disagreement, and that is what prompted all of this. And my question is, where all this energy does be when we're going to deal with the Netherlands? And I could imagine that they're busy looking at us now and laughing, because here they go again, divide and rule, and we continue to fall in the same playbook over and over and over. Madam Chair, you asked a very important question. Are these discussions just through the media, or are phone calls taking place, dialogue? Were there any attempts through you to the Minister to say, hey, listen, how can we resolve this issue? I'm sure that this is not the first disagreement. I must say that there's a lot of disagreements going on in government these days, even within the Council of Ministers, things that I think this country has never seen before. Nevertheless, it is a reality. But how do we deal with conflict resolution? Is it, oh, we done? That's it? Tens of thousands of lives at risk. We're talking about dollarization. Through you, Madam Chair, I heard the minister mention about the EC. Is the EC dollar is the dollar that the Prime Minister was talking about? That's my question to you. Is that the dollar that the Prime Minister is considering? Because I heard the minister went really deep into the fact that I think the East Caribbean dollar is handled by 8 different countries. Is the study that this task force is going to carry out, would we be considered to be the 9th, or are we talking about US dollars? Madam Chair, anybody that was here after Hurricane Irma, or even during COVID, know what happened with the dollars. My question through you to the minister, when we are faced with an unforeseen catastrophe in any which way, shape, or form, what is the plan to maintain, whether it be the EC dollar that I'm just assuming, I'll need clarity, or the US dollar? How do we secure that we have those? Because I know that everybody could remember there was only guilders going in circulation. Secondly, Madam Chair, through you to the minister, has there been any studies about dollarization in the past? And this is a rhetorical question because I know that there were. What were the results of those studies? I think that is very important before we make some emotional decisions that we consider the potential ramifications that it could have on our people. Madam Chair, we can't even get a price list in order with a basket of goods, but we're talking about going to do our own central bank. I mean, come on, we don't even have a budget amendment from last year. And we're talking about trying to do our own central bank. Madam Chair, this government, in my humble opinion, is not being real, not being realistic, and it's kind of out of touch with these big ambitions. Of course, I aspire for us to be self-determined and decide where we want to go 100%. But we need to organize ourselves first, Madam Chair. Call a spade a spade. Through you, Madam Chair, I heard the minister mention about that Mullet Bay is part of the central bank. I don't know if the minister misspoke or maybe I misunderstood. Can I get some clarity on that? Because according to me, Mullet Bay falls under in-year holding and not part of central bank, but it's under central bank supervision. Because when the minister was talking about the division of assets, I heard Mullet Bay being mentioned. Can I get some clarity on that, unless something changed in the meantime? Madam Chair, I brought countless motions here, countless questions about Mullet Bay, about in-year, about the status and how we're going to move. Everything was confidential until a while ago where the minister lined up almost, I would say, 100% in what I was mentioning in terms of what can potentially be the risk with Mullet Bay. All of a sudden, it ain't confidential no more. Right now, we're in an open setting, talking strategy of how to dissolve a CBCS, a union that has existed. It doesn't matter how long it existed. But everything for this government is confidential. But here we're having a strategic meeting, as we would do in the IPCO. It would be a tripartite. It would be offline. We'd have dialogue here. It would be, we discuss strategy. But here the first time I'm hearing a lot of this information is open and public. I would like to know through you, Madam Chair, if any confidential information has been shared during this meeting here that we're having here today from the minister. Madam Chair, through you to the minister, if we go back, let's say, 5 years, because this government likes to go back 5 years. In the last 5 years, how many conflicts has there been with the CBCS with respect to Sint Maarten and Curacao having any kind of disagreement? And if they were, what were these conflicts? Madam Chair, through you to the minister, I heard a lot of, feelings, and it would have to be corrected from the minister if that's not the case, that, the central bank union is long overdue to consider dismantling it because it's not good. But, Madam Chair, the faction leader of the Democratic Party, MP Kotai, mentioned here in I think it was a ceremonial meeting we had, that the DP is responsible for this, and the DP brought us this, and the DP brought us everything. So here you have the DP bringing us into this situation, and now we're being, I don't know if to call it being briefed on how we could get out of this union. And then, again, the DP is at the helm. So my question to you, Madam Chair, through you to the minister is, who do you if you have to go back and say how we got in this situation, where would you lay the blame in terms of all these disagreements and the tough situations we're going through with the central bank right now? Are we picking and choosing what a DP responsible for? Madam Chair, when I speak to Curacao, I'm going to leave it at that. They're not saying all these things. I heard venom, like we're ready to leave this thing today. And I'm not feeling that same energy there. So my question is, again, has there been any dialogue, Prime Minister to Prime Minister, Minister of Finance to the Minister of Finance since the last meeting in Curacao in terms of how we could maybe look for a feasible solution that does not hurt the people of Sint Maarten? Why I say that, Madam Chair, we just switched over to the Caribbean Gala that we've been trying to do for a long time now. Millions and millions of guilders went into it, which directly, indirectly falls right back on the people of the two countries. And now we're talking about leaving this thing go because of an emotion and because of appointing Bloom to our chairmanship. Madam Chair, I say this, and I would like an answer from the minister through you. The minister mentioned that there was a gentleman's agreement to appoint the chairman of the board. The former minister in Curacao and the current minister in Curacao deny this point vehemently, publicly all over. You, Madam Chair, as a chairman, a chairperson of Parliament, or as a member of Parliament, I should say, mentioned in the article, the real issue is not whose turn it is, but institutional stability, credibility, and public trust. I hear you, but for me, if the minister mentioned that we have to hold one head, we have to be united, then tell me the truth. I cannot fight like my colleague Lyndon Lewis and La Cruz did with you, but I could only be with you if you're telling me the truth. You understand? With that being said, Madam Chair, if there's any minutes, there's any confirmation to substantiate it, because I do believe it is important whose turn it is. Because if it's clear whose turn it is, then I think the conversation would end immediately. Because it can't be that the people in the room say it's not so, and the minister who mentioned it so did not even rebut to say, hey, listen, it happened on this date, this time, this location. I didn't feel that. All I heard from your leader through you to the minister is that it's not important. It is important for me. So that's a question that I would like answered as well, please. And Madam Chair, I'm saying all of this to say that I've sat in the executive branch and I had to make some tough decisions with respect to the people's business and not my emotions, because if I had to make emotional decisions, I think in 2020 of December, we would not have had liquidity support. We would have been down out. I mean, my colleague MP Iran could emphasize deeper on that in terms of our financial position that we were at the time. But when you are in a position, in this esteemed position, to govern, to represent the people, it should always be the people's best interest first and not emotion and not selective energy when it comes to suiting a few or making sure a few are benefiting from a situation. And I would like, through you, Madam Chair, to get from the minister not the what is in the media, or maybe it could be written, or maybe it could be public, because we decided to be public here. What is the real issue here at hand? Because to me, I'm missing the real issue here at hand, and I think that we're all being led down a rabbit hole, and I'm not sure if the light will follow us there, or if we will be able to see the light from the light tower once you reach there. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Doran. The next MP to speak is MP Iran. MP Iran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I would like to comment on the Chair's response to I believe, the ending of the first agenda point regarding the budget and the law, and the misinformation. I want to correct the Chair and ensure the public understands what the law states, not the opinion of a member of Parliament. Article 16, paragraph 3 of the Compatibility Rights Law states, until the new budget is established, or enacted the previous year serves as a legal basis for financial management for the purpose of keeping the public service running. Today, we also have the SG of Finance, the Minister of Finance here. So the Minister could also clarify this. The government also sent around a circulation to the staff in the government stating that same thing. So jubilees are not going to be paid. Certain bonuses are not going to be paid because the new budget has not been established. So yes, the budget, the government is only dealing with operational items and items that keeps the government running. No new policies are being enacted, and I'm pretty sure that if you ask the minister or the ministers, they have a lot of documents that the government isn't signing off because there is no new budget. And if it isn't so, then the government shouldn't send around a circulation to their staff stating otherwise. And may I ask a question? Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the minister, is that so? Is it so, based on what I said just now, the Article 16, that the government now is operating in that manner? And is it so that currently, because there's no budget 2026 or budget amendment 2025, that there are jubilees, among others, not being paid out? And is it not so that the government has circulated this information among the civil servants? Madam Chair, I, like my former colleague, really believe that if the minister had appointed the chair that the minister wanted, Madam Chair, we wouldn't be here discussing today about any discussion about leaving the monetary union. I don't believe that. Because as the former speaker said, everything was good. When it came to ENYA, the 2024, literally everything was good up until that single point. And I expected, personally, more out of the presentation today. There's data right now currently that we could just check on the financial statements of the central bank, et cetera, et cetera. For example, how much money do we get every year from the central bank based on those shares that we have? I think in 2024, it was around 11 million guilders. So yes, leaving the central bank also means that we have to somehow come up with funding to be able to fill the gaps currently that we get from the central bank. So what I don't appreciate or like as members of parliament or even as government, to create this illusion that we could just leave or we will just leave and everything will be fine and dandy, but we don't give, again, and that's really typical with the current government, they don't give the reality and don't give any solutions to the financial gaps we will have. Right now, we have zero revenue generating 2025-2026 budget. We called a meeting about 7 months ago on this topic. Nothing comes up. So where do we fill this gap of 11 million guilders, which will be even more in the coming years? The minister mentioned in her presentation that Sint Maarten has been outvoted numerous times. So my question is, and I'm not even asking to be very clear, because the minister stated Sint Maarten's board has been outvoted consistently over the years. Okay. So what I'm asking now, Madam Chair, how many times has Sint Maarten been outvoted? Because we would have to know that the board, who's on the board, what the topic was. So again, I don't want any emotional sayings without the facts. And I really don't want to hear, Madam Chair, that it's private information. No, because the minister said it. The minister said Sint Maarten has been consistently outvoted. I don't need to know the topics. I just want to know how many times. The minister also shared and stated, in her humble opinion, the sentiment of Curacao and their reasoning for wanting to leave. Again, we're on the floor of Parliament. I just want to deal with facts personally. So, but I would like to ask the minister where she got those sources from. So, Minister, through you, Madam Chair, these sentiments that you provide in the presentation, where are they from? Can you please provide some articles, some press releases, some radio interviews, the dates, the times? Where were these sentiments born? If it's a conversation you had with a minister or MP, what date? So, because again, we are having a presentation today for the general public, given the illusion that these are things that Curacao said, and I can't find them. MP Duran said it also. He spoke to the minister, a person over there, and they're not of the same opinion. So where are we getting these things from? And the sources? today we are discussing the central bank and the potential leaving of the central bank. But right now, through you, Madam Chair, the government and the Minister of Finance has the power to appoint our current board members. So why isn't that done? The small little items that we have right now that we are in control of isn't being done. And I must now trust the current government with a task of putting together a whole central bank and also expect them to fill that central bank with locals, because we have great examples in GB of them filling the GB with locals. We have great examples of them putting the CEO of the airport. We have great examples of them appointing. So what is the plan? We have a task force. No, I asked a better question, Madam Chair. We have the task force that the minister is putting together, Madam Chair. Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the minister, what are the parameters for the task force? So what are the guidelines? Can we as a parliament get these guidelines sent today to us on what you expect of this task force? So what is their goal? How do you expect to execute? And is there any financial components to this task force? So is it going to cost money? How are we selecting the task force? Is it the same way we selected individuals, the individual who was supposed to be chair of the central bank, through the like-minded friendship group? How is this task force being put together? And if there is financial consequences to the task force, does that mean it's not going to happen in 2026 because we don't have a budget as yet? Madam Chair, like I said, I believe that a discussion on should we or should we not be in a monetary union with Curacao is a topic, but I do believe that the government has a lot of information already, a lot of information that could have been put in this presentation to show, hey, these are the current situations with Sint Maarten, this is what we get every year, these are the consequences. We don't need a task force to do that. The basics can be done already by government. The data is there. We have the financial statements, we have Curacao, we have the central bank itself that already has done a prelim research already on dollarization, for example. So that's what I expect to see in this presentation. A timeline when we want to come out of this, if that's the case. Madam Chair, for a meeting that was called by 6 members of Parliament, I expected a little bit more, and I hope that when the minister comes back with the answers, we get more. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Irian. I see MP Otley would like the floor. MP Otley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll be very quick. I too stand with Sint Maarten, but at what cost? And at the end of the day, I am a politician. And I remember clearly when I voted against the INYA, I said central bank had no type of recourse. They were able to get away clean, and we had to bear the brunt of it. We were able to survive for a couple more years. Curacao was in dire need. And yet, we were forced into a situation by the Netherlands to save Curacao. Because, Minister, when you first came to Parliament through you, Madam Chair, you had me sold. And then when it was time to produce, you changed. At that moment, pertaining to ENYA, let me make it clear. And that's why I could not support at that time. A year and a half later, I'm afraid to say what I said I hope I didn't have to say, which is, I told you so. I have to say it. Because today now, and I started my notification by saying to members of coalition, silence is consent. And sometimes going along to get along sends us along the wrong path. Now today, many of us are asking the same questions what we should have asked when we were voting. Now, so yes, it's like, let me relate to growing up with the boys. I got your back, but I need to know what you do for layman's term. I need to know what you do before I go fight for you. And if you can show me, like all these other MPs requested, the minutes, the documents, and show me that you were lied to, misled, then I can fight for you. Not you, Sint Maarten. Sint Maarten. No, I mean Sint Maarten. But we have to go into the battle being prepared to win. For a second, if I had closed my eye, I would feel like we're dealing with Trump and Russia and who leaving and who have to leave, and that's how bad it sounded. So through you, Madam Chair, I will always defend Sint Maarten. But the question is, at what cost? So I look forward to the information being sent for me. And again, a year and a half later, I told you so. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank you, MP Otley. Minister, just earlier today, someone who returned from Curacao said to me that on different talk shows in Curacao, based on this topic, the politicians who suggested leaving the monetary union were being beaten up on, and it was being said, when you talk for you. You ain't talking for Curacao. That's the way that was shared to me by someone who currently came back from Curacao. Hence, my statement that I believe you are totally correct to approach this, not based on a knee-jerk reaction, oh my God, the city going, we got to go too. No, that is not what I understood you to say. And if you said it, then I would like you to clarify it. Because I maintain my position in terms of, in order for us to be prepared, yes, somebody gonna have to provide to these members in here a clear overview of every aspect that comes into play. And you have clearly stated that this could never be an overnight exercise because the charter states it. So we don't have to get afraid, we don't have to be frightened, we do have to be prepared. And unfortunately, today, we can't make specific and urgent decisions regarding our tax system because we don't have data. Yes, there's pieces we could pull out, but if we are going to make a decision such as this by pulling pieces from here and pulling pieces from there, I would not accept that as a basis for us to have the fundamental discussion about in or out, and if out, then what? And I understand that is what you and this government will be seeking before you come to Parliament with any type of proposal. The matter of, I maintain, and I'm going to explain why again, I don't think, and Minister, I would love to be proven wrong, but I don't think that you are going to find anything regarding, in writing, regarding the countries proposing a chairperson and who at what time, because that is not the way it is to happen. This rotating thing is an understanding between ministers in the past. So we ain't gonna find no minutes. The official, and that's why, Minister, I'm saying, make sure our board and our members, to start with, are intact, so the board and the members are intact, so that a proposal can come, because what everybody seems to be forgetting, and the questions about, Minister, did you appoint this one, why did you not, and why did you appoint? There will be no board member, none whatsoever, not from Curacao, not from Sint Maarten. There will be no chairperson unless the two countries agree on that person. So this thing about why you didn't appoint and why these still pending, unless you got the approval for that member, even the Sint Maarten member, and the same goes for the Curacao member. Unless you give approval for the Curacao member, we will not have the member. I am not going to waste any of my time asking for any type of written information about the chairperson and the rotation and whether he or she was from Sint Maarten or Curacao, because it is no formal agreement. There is no place that you will find that as formality. What we will find as formality is the responsibility of 5 of the 6 members to make a proposal. And then it is up to the minister and the countries to agree with that proposal. That is what should happen ASAP. And again, I believe the board members from Sint Maarten can find persons that they could put forward, just like I'm sure those from Curacao can find, and then let a proposal come for the chairperson. But we need a full operating entity at this time to make sure that we are prepared for whatever eventuality will come our way. So those who want to know what I mean or what your leader said, your leader stands, as she has told me, by what she said. So I stand by what I said, because if we want to play cute with it, and yeah, your leader said this, minister, your leader said, yes, your leader said, and she means it. And it's not what we're going to, I stand by what I said. I will not be wasting any time on trying to figure out, but when did that minister say he proposed this person or that person, or when did you know? Because there's nothing formal, there's no formal basis for it. So, Minister, I would suggest with your presentation, you said you're going to propose a task force. I agree with having this looked into not by one person, a few persons with knowledge of this matter and with heart and interest for Sint Maarten. That is what I want to see in this task force, by whichever name you want to call it, Minister, you call it, but make sure that their task is clear, so that when you put to Parliament a decision one way or another to stay or not to stay, it is based on facts, it is based on data, and it is based on information. Minister, I look forward to hearing the answers to the questions that my colleagues and I ask, and I just making sure that I asked and stated what I want to state, and I see we have some other MPs to speak. I gave the floor to MP Doran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Minister. Minister, I would like to know if at any point in time were you blocked or any sort of hole in the road, for lack of a better word, in terms of appointing the Sint Maarten members, because I know that it has to be done unanimously. So my question to you, through you, Madam Chair, was that the case? Because I think they're about 2 years pending now. And secondly, I would like to state something here for the record, and I say this with the utmost respect for everybody in here. If I ask for information, if I choose to write a letter, because I've been told in here why you had to write a letter, you could have just asked the minister, or why you call a meeting, you could just ask the minister, or who don't want minutes or want minutes. I want minutes, and I believe that each one of us in here were duly elected members of Parliament, and everybody's way and mechanism to do their job should be respected. So through you to the minister, I would like to re-emphasize the fact that I would like to know if you can justify, validate in any way, shape, form, or fashion, and confirm if you had an agreement to appoint the chairperson in this union. And I'll take it a step further. I remember during the INYA meeting, you mentioned, Minister, that Mr. Gibson was one of your like-minded advisors. AT&S publicly stated that Mr. Gibson was the one that appointed him. So did you seek counsel from your advisor based on this point? Because through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister, I think that that would make sense, and that would end a lot of discussion that we are having, because we are here relying on second-hand information. And I don't know if everybody else missed it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Minister, but your presentation today was about dismantling the monetary union. And I could be wrong, but that's what I understood. All I heard was Curacao. This is how we could do it. This ain't going to be the first time because we had Netherlands Antilles. This ain't the first breakup, and let's just do what we have to do in a nutshell. So if members of the coalition or members of the DP were privy to more information than we are privy to, which is right, we outside, we're not inside those rooms, then I would like some clarity on that point. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Doran. The next MP to speak is MP Irian. MP Irian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the last speaker in terms of, I understand the chair doesn't want these documents and the chair doesn't believe in this, but we had at least 4 or 5 other members of parliament that indicated they would like this. So I don't know if the chair is guiding you or just like a state secretary of finance or something, but the other members of parliament, we wanted this. Secondly, the chair also stated that there will be no chair appointment, there'll be no board appointments because it has to be unanimously approved. Through you, Madam Chair, I would like to ask the minister, the board members from the Sint Maarten side, did they already get approval from Curacao? So the 3 board members from Sint Maarten, did they already get approval from Sint Maarten? Because I don't see the issue. And I'll go a step further also. The current Minister of Finance, Curacao, did they have any issues with the members of Sint Maarten being appointed? Did they have any issues with it? So one, if Curacao in the past already approved these appointments, and secondly, if there's any current minister, government that said, no, we don't want these go up in any formal writing or anything like that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Irian. You're so correct about the right of every member of parliament, chair or not, to state his or her position as a member of parliament. So correct. I couldn't agree with you more. Members of parliament, I don't see any other member of parliament who wishes to speak. Minister, you have heard the questions, you've heard the comments. And are there, first of all, is there any response that you would like to give at this time? And then we shall caucus and see when you would be able to respond to all of the questions to all of the members of parliament. Minister?
Madam Chair, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come today to present what I believe is getting not only the people of Sint Maarten, but the members of parliament for sure up to date with the current matters as it pertains to the CBCS. Now, I say that to say, I don't know, and I say this respectfully, I don't know which part of my presentation there was the sentiment about me wanting to dismantle the union. At no point did I, Minister Marinka Gums, Minister of Finance, indicate that it is my opinion, it is my position to wanting to dismantle. As a matter of fact, I can say this. In Curacao, and even on Sint Maarten, I have been championing the Caribbean Guild. Everywhere I go, I ask, first of all, you go to a shop, you give them guilders, they want to give you back dollars. I am not accepting because, not because I'm minister, but here we go. I had an MP talked about how much money was invested into this. Yes, absolutely right. So for me, the talk about dismantling didn't come, at least not from this minister, at least not from me. I went to Curacao, and it was a whole different discussion in Curacao. And for whatever the reason, and I gave some opinions today as to what I believe those reasons are, that is for their account. But I am not going to be held in a position where I am at least not prepared or preparing the country that in the event someone knocks at my door to tell me they want out, that I am not prepared to handle that separation. Even in a relationship, anybody tell me they're going, it's bye-bye. I am not trying to see why we need to hold on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare myself for what eventualities may exist. So I just want to say that, Madam Chair, and in reference to all of the questions and or comments that were posed by the honorable members of parliament, It will take some time for me to come back and provide those answers. I do not want to provide them in writing because I think a lot that was said here today deserves me to come back to Parliament and respond in person. So I would estimate it to about 2 weeks, and then I will be back to Parliament to give the answers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister Gums, Minister of Finance. Your office and the Secretariat of Parliament will pin that date for the continuation of this meeting and in approximately 2 weeks. Members of Parliament, Minister and support staff of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, including those in the tribune here with us, thank you for your participation and your interest in this topic. And I would now adjourn this meeting until the minister can return with the answers to the questions posed by members of Parliament. This Central Committee meeting of Parliament is hereby adjourned.